Let's begin.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today to our Black Fatigue Action Conversation. My name is Diane Hightower, and I am a trainer and facilitator at the YWCA Greater Pittsburgh. Allow me to briefly describe myself and my surroundings. I am an African American woman. My pronouns are she and her. My hair is natural and in twist. I wear glasses. I am wearing a beige sweater this afternoon with a bright pink and white shirt. My physical location is my home office, where I have a large picture window in front of me overlooking our neighborhood. And I'm also surrounded by family photos on my desk and artwork on the walls. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the sponsors who help make YWCA's Action Conversation series possible. YWCA Action Conversations are presented by Highmark, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Allegheny Health Network. Thank you both for your support. I also want to thank YWCA staff member Sharita Thomas and board member Shalita Camrata Webb for suggesting today's topic of Black fatigue. I remember exactly where I was, the lecture hall, the class, the professor, the anxiousness and excitement during my first semester as an undergraduate enrolled in a history course focused on African Americans, Black people, and their history. This is where I heard Fannie Lou Hamer's call to action for the very first time. I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. And although I did not have the lived experience and self reflection to name it as Black fatigue at that time, Miss Hamer captured in this very short statement that grew into a powerful rallying cry for the civil rights movement. She captured the personal anguish and weariness of Black fatigue and its relationship to Black resistance. But so many times since those college years, I have met Black fatigue, but did not know how to resist it. I didn't know how to navigate it, both personally and professionally. And most importantly, I didn't fully understand its impact on my mental health and wellness. I think author Mary Frances Winter says it best in her book Black Fatigue. In a first chapter of the book, she calls My Black Fatigue. Quote, I was hard pressed to name it. It is an underlying syndrome of sorts that permeates my very being. It is always present. I now know it to be Black fatigue. Ultimately, the YWCA's Action Conversation series is focused on individual and collective action. Our hope is that today's conversation about fatigue helps to ignite actions of resistance, calls for justice, demands for healing, and the victory that we all find in joy, and all in the face of a fatigue that affects our minds, our bodies, and our spirit. So, to guide this conversation, let's begin and let's be joined by our panelists. Our first panelist this afternoon, Courtney Abigunde, known throughout the region for her culturally responsive and affirming mental health care and support while serving as the managing director of Still Smiling here in Pittsburgh. Welcome, Courtney. Our second panelist, Dr. Toya Jones, an assistant professor in the School of Social Work at the University of Pittsburgh and nationally recognized as an expert on the impact of trauma on children and adults and overcoming unresolved trauma. And our third panelist, Marisha N. Winters Reese, the president and chief operating officer of the Winters Group and co author of the second edition of the book called Black Fatigue: How Racism Erodes the Mind, Body, and Spirit, which is due to be released in June. The views of our guest do not necessarily represent the YWCA Greater Pittsburgh as an organization or our sponsors, but YWCA Greater Pittsburgh welcomes their expertise, their opinions, and their passion for equity. I will ask the panelists a few questions that we have prepared in advance. And if you are following us on Zoom, please put your comments or questions in the chat for our panelists. Facebook audience members should post their questions in the comments sections, and we'll take audience questions after the panelists respond to the initial questions that highlight the issues. So let's get started. Round one with our questions. Now, this question is for all of our panelists. Action conversations always start by inviting panelists to share their personal connections to the topic and to introduce themselves more fully. Would each of you, and we're going to start with Marisha, would each of you please introduce yourselves a bit in relationship to this topic of Black fatigue?
Thank you, Diane, and thank you everyone who is here with us today. So I am Marisha Winters Reese, and to share just my visual representation for those that it's helpful for, I'm a light-skinned Black Zennial woman. So if you haven't heard the term Zennial, I'm on the cusp of Gen X and Millennial. So depending on the way the wind blows, I might lean more millennial, might lean more Gen X. My pronouns are she and her. My hair is in sister locks, and they're in a curly style today that hits just below my shoulders. Wearing a tennis ball green sweater, short sleeve sweater, and behind me there is a painting on the wall of a woman in pink and green tones, and also some books on the shelf. And no, I have not read all the books on the shelf. Um, and so just to share a little bit about, just my connection to Black fatigue as well, aside from the book that Diane already has shared about. In the book, in addition to the chapter Diane shared about Mary Francis's Black fatigue, I have a chapter in the new book called My Black Fatigue, and I share about, even though I grew up with some level of privilege that my parents did not grow up, it did not shield me from experiencing racism, right? But I may not have experienced racism in such overt ways as my parents have. So I share some things about my childhood as growing up and going to predominantly white schools, being one of the only Black kids in class, and classmates being fascinated by things like my hair and all the different things my hair could do, right? And at the time, I didn't take offense to it, but looking back, it was just like that beginning of being othered, right? Like I'm looked at as this unique being or this exotic thing, and how to even explain that. And also I share an experience in the book about about wanting a dog. I've always wanted a dog forever. And back in the day when we used to get the paper, well, some people might still get the physical newspaper. I don't. But back in the day when we used to get it and used to have the ads in the paper about dog, and it would list like dogs for sale and things. And I would circle the dog and leave the paper for my parents and never would get the dog. And my brother was adamantly against getting a dog. And he even did a presentation about why we do not need a dog because we are not responsible enough to have dogs. But aside from all that, for my 11th birthday, my parents were gifting me a dog, and I was able to go see the dog and pick it out. And then I was told later we had to get a different dog. And at the time, I wasn't given the reason why, but later it was shared that because we were Black, the breeder's partner would not let us have the dog. So
Mhm.
just sharing some stories of how Black, like these things where we may not think of, like we all go through these experiences, right, of racism and just how you remember them because these are from my childhood and they're moments that I remember and carry with me. And then, real quickly, just about health wise, fibroids. When you're talking about Black women, we experience, right, fibroids probably more than, I don't have the statistics, but I'm gonna say more than any other race and ethnicity. And so I share that in the book as well, how I suffered from fibroids and wondering were my fibroids a result of this intergenerational trauma and stress passed down from
Mhm.
generation to generation? Because my mom also went through that. And just in what we're experiencing today, our work, the Winters Group, is in DEI space. So as you all know, DEI,
Mhm.
there's so much against it, so much pullback, all this rhetoric. And so that also just has layered on to the fatigue that I've experienced. So just that's just some ways that I'm personally connected to this topic in addition to the book itself. So thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your comments. Next, I'll ask Toya to talk to us a little bit about her personal connection to this topic of Black fatigue, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Toya Jones, and it's my pleasure to be here to talk about this topic. I said this is so important. I didn't hesitate to say yes. I thought about this quite a bit, and I said, why are we tired? And I really, oh, I forgot to describe myself. Okay, I am a Cocoa Brown. I'm over 40. That's all y'all gonna get. And I love that term, Marisha. I love that. I take that. My hair I have really long locks. I put it up in a ponytail because it's warm-ish here in Pittsburgh, and so I wanted to act like I was hot. I have a blue shirt on, and I have fantastic earrings on because I am an earring junkie. And so I like to collect them, and people give them to me. And so these are from Senegal. And behind me, I'm in my office. So I have a lamp, a painting one of my friends did, a couple awards up there. Okay, so, and I have glasses on. Forgot I have glasses. So, when I thought about this Black fatigue, I was like, yeah, I'm Black and I'm fatigued. And I thought about it, and I talked to some of my Black friends, some of my Black professor friends here, and we were all tired. We went around the table like, me too, I'm tired. And if I took a poll with all the participants and my panelists, we're all going to be like, me too, I'm tired. And I said, why are we so tired? We're overachieving. Listen to this resume and these CVs of just my panelists. Y'all are out there doing such fabulous things, and it's like, why are we so tired? And I really thought about an incident that happened with my daughter. My daughter's 15 now, and she was a little younger. It was a few years ago. We were attending this predominantly white church because my nephew is a phenomenal actor and singer. And so he was in this production, and we went there. She had this shirt on that said, God is dope. And we were walking through this crowd, and this older white woman said, God is dope. That doesn't make any sense. And I turned around. I mean, y'all, if I could have like red eyes, I started turning into the Hulk. My shirt was ripping up. I was like, what did you say? I got so angry. I mean, 0 to 100 so fast. I turned around and was like, what did you say? And I said, it doesn't make sense to you. And I felt myself like physically getting hot. And I looked over and saw my daughter like, because she saw how angry and how upset I got. And I literally had to swoosh it back down because first of all, my poor daughter is seeing this. It's terrifying her. This little old white lady was about to catch it, and I just really thought about like, that's why I'm tired.
Mhm.
I don't have to explain this shirt to you. God is dope. That's our culture. That's what we're saying,
Mhm.
and just thinking about fighting against my son's private school because he has these beautiful thick locks. Why do we have to explain the hair that grows out of our head? That's how his hair grows naturally. So I'm tired because I'm tired of fighting about that. We're tired. We're tired of explaining last year's Super Bowl. Kendrick Lamar, we understood every word he said. Now
Mhm.
y'all mad about this year. Now you can't understand Spanish. But I'm tired. I don't want to explain any of this stuff to you. And so this is racism. I was going to say at its finest, but it's not fine.
Hmm.
It's a detriment to us and to our psychological, emotional, physical. I physically felt like I could have ran up on this lady. What in the world am I doing? Like, I don't fight people, but it was reaching back, and I felt that anger bubbling up. And so, yeah, yeah, we're tired. Heck yeah, we're tired. And then we're overachieving all the time. We've been told we have to do this and we got to be on that. And then if I ask again, my esteemed panelists, what all y'all got to do today? They're like, this is one of 12 things that we're doing today. We're always busy, we're always overachieving. And then we're programmed almost to fight against each other. And so we see each other and we're like, oh, we're a Black woman. There only can be one of us, Brandy or Monica. We can't have Brandy and Monica. It's like, what? Yes, we can, and we can celebrate each other. But that's how it's set up in society for us to fight and compete against one another, to eliminate one another, so that there's not a threat, to the dominant culture. And so I make it my business, and I'm so glad that we're all together celebrating each other and lifting up each other. And we don't have to carry that on. We don't have to make each other tired or be tired fighting each other and fighting the man, all the time. We don't have to do that. And so, we band together and fight together, the ops, as my daughter would say, and continue to give each other strength. Yeah, I know I'm
Yeah.
solution focused and you didn't ask for that yet, but that's it. That's my Black fatigue.
Thank you so much, Toy. We appreciate that. And then our third panelist, Courtney, could you again give us some of your reflections about your personal journey as well as our topic for the afternoon, Black fatigue? And Courtney, welcome.
Thank you, Diane. It is such a pleasure to be here, to be having this conversation. I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted, y'all. It's too much. It's all the time. Even if I get off of Twitter, even if I'm not scrolling at stuff, I'm hearing about things. I'm experiencing things in public, in real life, and at home. So this conversation is just so important. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the topic and the invitation to think about it. It's so important that we recognize the real embodied experience that comes with how our society is structured and
Mhm.
how we treat people. And I think, I'm thinking about the example that was given before, about the Super Bowl and Kendrick. I think about Bad Bunny this year, but I also think about stories about us. My personal experience starts from when I was very young, growing up in primarily white spaces, being told about, you know, the great dream of America and how diverse we are and how Jim Crow isn't a thing anymore. But the lived experience is not that. We're not fully over this, and so there's a gaslighting in it, and there's a not knowing. I think especially in those spaces, there's a not realizing maybe at first that you're being treated differently because of the color of your skin, but then something happens where it's like, oh, that's the difference, and then we notice a pattern here until it becomes more explicit. um, and so yeah, just noticing that in my life and noticing it in my body, it's a
Mhm.
felt experience. So
Mhm.
much of this is that we're told that it's not happening. And so when we finally start to validate it, you notice the weight of it. And also maybe there's a little bit of a relief because, oh my God, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. Like I'm experiencing things. Um, and that should be named. And so having conversations like this, naming it, getting the opportunity to sit in discussion with it and acknowledging it is just such an important piece. That way, it doesn't feel like something that's just like inherently wrong with me, or like inherently wrong with us. So I'm grateful for the discussion.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Courtney, could you take a few minutes and describe yourself and your surroundings for us?
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So I am a brown skinned woman with her hair up in a tight bun. I'm wearing a black headband, glasses, and I have headphones in, sweater because even though it's getting warmer, it still feels a little chilly where I'm at. I'm sitting in a blue room that I use as my office. You can probably see a bed behind me and some artwork. Um, yeah,
Thank you. Thank you so much.
absolutely.
Let's move forward in our conversation this afternoon, and I'm going to start or continue with Marisha and ask the following. Um, Critics have hailed the book Black Fatigue: How Racism Erodes the Mind, Body, and Spirit, written in 2020, authored by Mary Frances Winters, someone I think you might know. But we'll talk about that in a second. And in their writings about this particular book, critics have unrelentingly said that it's an honest and unapologetically focused piece of research. And now you are working on the second edition of the book, as you mentioned. Could you explain the term Black fatigue and how it shows up in our society? And I'm asking you to explain it from the perspective of your research and your writing.
Thank you, Diane. And I do know Mary Frances Winters a little bit. Yeah, so she is my mother, as well as my business partner. And so just a little brief on the business part. I joined working with her 14 years ago. She will be celebrating 42 years in business next month. And
Wow.
I feel it's important to name in this conversation as we're talking about Black fatigue, because as we know, Black folks that own businesses often have less access to capital, which
Yes.
sometimes contributes to us not being able to own businesses for long. And so that also contributes to our Black fatigue. So I
Mhm.
just wanted to shout her out, even though she's not on, but shout her out for that, for
Absolutely.
being in business continuously for 42 years. And so, as
Uh-huh.
you shared, Diane, she wrote the book in 2020. And the book really does acknowledge that intergenerational burden that Black people carry, Black and Brown people carry every day due to racism. And so the way she officially defined Black fatigue is that the repeated variations of stress
Mhm.
that result in extreme exhaustion and cause mental, physical, and spiritual maladies that are passed down from generation to generation. So when we sat down to write, she didn't want to even write the second edition of Black Fatigue because she was fatigued. Like it's fatiguing to write about Black fatigue. And so I was like, well, if I join with you, will you do it? And so she decided to do it. And I think it's important. So even as Dr. Toya and Courtney have named, like, this is so we all are experiencing, and to have something that helps us put a name to it and to share with others. Like, so the book is not just for Black people. Even though a lot of Black people have read it and said, "Oh, I feel affirmed." Like, yes, this has happened to me. Now I know I'm not. I don't know if Dr. Toya you said this, but it's like, or Courtney, but now I know I'm. It's not all in my head. I'm not crazy. Like, this is like a real thing happening. But it's
Mhm.
also helpful for our allies or aspiring allies to read as well to understand our lived experience, so we don't have to teach it. But in the book, in this new edition, we have 50% new content. A lot of that is because we had to update so many statistics just in these 5 years since it came out of things that have gotten worse. And as we
Wow.
know, just in this last year and a half, well, not even a year and a half, it feels like a year and a half, but this last year of our new administration, things that have been rolled back that are impacting the lives of Black and Brown people.
Mhm.
And so in the first edition, there was a chapter called Addressing Sublime Ignorance, because after the murder of George Floyd, coming, oh, wow, I didn't know racism was still, existed. We had a Black president. Oh, my goodness. And it was
Mhm.
like this ignorance, right? Or the COVID-19 and the disparities with Black people. Oh, I didn't know. we knew. I'm glad you finally are on board, right? And so we were experiencing this like ignorance from clients we work with or corporations. Now in the book, that chapter has been totally rewritten to from sublime ignorance to deliberate erasure. Because now we're seeing, right, the erasure of DEI. DEI is being weaponized. The term woke is being weaponized. Even the term black fatigue has been co-opted by white people to say that they're black, they have black fatigue because they're fatigued by black people.
Mm,
So that just shows like out like all the like we went from oh yes we're anti-racist corporation to now it's like we can't say DI nope no anti-woke all of these things. Even when we think about the banning of books, right? How does that what does that tell us about our contribution to this country, to this world, and what if it matters, if it is relevant to be taught. We also go into and I don't want this to be doom and gloom, but we talk about there's a chapter then is now that talks about just from decades ago how things have not greatly improved when it comes to wealth gaps, home ownership, unemployment rates. And I'll pause on unemployment because as many of us probably know, last year, just in the first 8 months of last year, 300,000 Black women exited the workforce due to layoffs, right? Government layoffs, pullback from DEI. And so by August of last year, the unemployment rate for Black women was 7.5% compared to 3.5% of white women. We talk about racism, like racism literally makes us sick and it being a pre-existing condition. So when we think about the health disparities and how that manifests, how it manifests in our health and the outcomes and the disparities. I talked about the fibroids earlier in my story, but just think about maternal mortality rates, right? So Black women 3 times more likely to die in pregnancy. How we're over policed and over surveilled. AI is huge right now. We added a chapter in the book about AI because one, AI is in everything, right? And so it could determine if you get a loan, it could determine if you get a job. And based on what data that AI tool was trained on, that's already full of biases, right? That
mhm,
could you could be denied that loan, you could be denied that job simply because you are Black. So it's just the algorithm also now contributing to our racism, as well as the environmental impact of AI that a lot of people may not be aware of, and how that disproportionately impacts Black and brown people. So the book names all these things that are contributing to that stress, to that exhaustion,
mhm.
and that mental and physical stress that we have. And I wanted to just touch real quickly because the definition talks about the generation passing down from generation to generation. And so that intergenerational memory that gets passed down. So for centuries, we've been told and taught that we're less than. So that gets passed down to us through generation. And there's a study we talk about in the book that literally like maternal experiences with racism can be passed down to the baby in the womb before they're born. So before even birth, like before you're even out of the womb, you already have this impact of racism on your life.
Mhm.
That was a lot. I'm sorry, but so that's just a touch on some of where we touch in the book on all these things that we're experiencing that contribute to our Black fatigue.
Hmm. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Dr. Toya, could you talk to us a little bit about the following question? You are a trauma expert in the field of social work, and Black fatigue has been described as a cycle of intergenerational stress and trauma. From a trauma-informed perspective, how do you understand the impact of Black fatigue, and what do people misunderstand the most about it?
Thank you for this question. I'm thrilled that you're framing racism as trauma because that's exactly what it is. There's enough literature and essays and talks out there to really solidify that racial trauma looks like PTSD symptoms. I've been a therapist for double-digit years, and I'm a trauma therapist. And I look at my clients and hear their symptoms and see how it absolutely mirrors symptoms of racial trauma. And there's lots of literature out there. And so I'm so glad that y'all framed it that way. I'm like, kudos and hats off to y'all for this question. So I have a podcast called Healing Overflow with Dr. Toy. And my second podcast that I ever did, and I hope y'all check it out, it's called um, The Default. And so a default reaction, I talk about the trauma reaction and the neurological impact of trauma. And as I studied this throughout the years, I realized, and it goes deeper on the podcast. I'm just going to skim a little bit about the neurological impact of trauma. We experience all these traumatic um, events, and we all talked about it. Even on this panel, we talked about these events that happen, like losing a puppy because you are a Black girl is horrific.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why did I get so angry at that woman for talking about my daughter's t-shirt? And I thought about, more childhood trauma that came from going to my friend's house, probably 5 or 6 years old. Back then we roamed the neighborhood free. The little toddlers walking around the neighborhood, going to my friend's house, and she was my bestie, and she was a white girl, and I went to go see if she wanted to come out and play. And I remember these angry parents coming out and hollering and screaming at me, calling me the N-word. I'm running back up the street to get my parents getting dressed, coming down, fighting with these, verbally fighting with these parents for antagonizing me. And I said, that's where it came from. That's where this anger today came from. And so while we are inadvertently passing down these reactions through social learning, social learning theory says that we pass down behaviors just by watching one another. This is also survival behaviors. And so it's intergenerational. That's what people don't understand. So we have these behaviors and reactions, and we look at it and say, that's our culture. And that's just how we act. But then it's criminalized and it's looked down upon by society because, oh, we're loud, or we got hype, or we jump to defending our child who just trying to wear a t-shirt to her cousin's play, now she got to be attacked, and my son's just trying to wear his hair, or my sister and I having lunch when our kids were young, and some older white couple came over and said how well behaved our children were. And my sister and I became so defensive. Don't be looking at our kids talking about they well behaved. This is being passed down. And as my daughter looked at me and as our kids looked at us, that fight, flight, or freeze response, these situations come in through our five senses and it's laid down in our brains, but our frontal lobe is cut out of the equation. The frontal lobe is helping us to say, well, this person doesn't mean us harm, or I should react this way. All of that logical thinking is out the door, and our primitive responses take over, our fight, flight, or freeze response. And so y'all can guess what response my default is. Like, I'm ready to fight. Would you say? You know what I mean? Calm down. Well, we don't have permission to calm down. We don't have a couch to lay on. We're tired, but we can't sit down and rest, and we're always fighting. And that's being passed down through generations. And then you're seeing, I'm director of the bachelor program at Pitt and social work, and I see my students fighting and sometimes fighting against me. And I have to tell them, it's okay, I'm on your side. We're listening. I'm listening to you. I'm covering you. Then they realize that they're just always fighting, like the gerbil on the wheel, just always fighting. You don't have to. But who says we don't have to? We had to fight all the way back then, to my grandmother telling me stories about fighting her neighbor just because she's Black, or my grandpa fighting because he's from the South and he watched a lynching as he was younger through a fence. Like, what does that do to your psyche? What does that do to you emotionally? Well, we're passing it down. There's a lot of research to say it's passed down through our cells. I'm a behaviorist, so it's passed down through behavior, and it's a pass down of protection. We're protecting our children, don't compliment them. They're not that great Don't try to sell them off on the block. It's coming from when our children and our families were sold. And so what people don't understand is that the behaviors, the internalized racism, the racism towards one another to the point where we're attacking Real Housewives Atlanta style on each other, it's being passed down because we're trying to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unnecessary today, but is it unnecessary? No, not really. So that's what folks don't understand. Like that criminal behavior that you see, the black on black crime statistics, increasing. That's all coming from, that damaged, healthy, narcissistic self-esteem that we're supposed to have and have that pride in ourselves. Well, that's been damaged through generations and generations of racism. I know I sound doom and gloom too, sis. Dang. We're gonna pull it together at the end, but we gotta give the
We
information.
will pull it together, but there's a lot here. There's a lot here. Courtney, I'm turning to you, please, Director Courtney, with this question. Still Smiling bridges the gap between Black people and mental health support through education, through advocacy, and awareness. Front and center on your webpage is the claim, healing is our birthright. Healing is our birthright. What does that mean, Courtney, to you and the organization? And how do we as Black people, especially Black women, name for fatigue for what it is? And we've done that for several minutes and it's been powerful. But how do we name fatigue for what it is? And how do we heal, Courtney? Talk to us also about healing.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I definitely need it in this context because it is a lot. It's a great weight. And thank you so much, Marisha and Dr. Toya, for how you framed what this is and how it specifically gets passed on in ways that we realize and also ways that we don't. Dr. Toy, you said it's a protection. I'm responding and trying to keep us safe, but it's also, maybe having unintentional consequences that we don't realize. Healing is our birthright is a beautiful quote from an organization we admire called BEAM, the Black Emotional and Mental Health Collective. They're based out of Los Angeles. They host peer support trainings and workshops, doing very similar work as Still Smiling and some of the folks on this call. To me, healing is our birthright means that it's basically a reclamation. We've been told how and when and why we can heal. It's been removed from us our cultural ways of healing. We've been told that this exhaustion that we're feeling is just how it's going to be for us. But that's not the case, and we can reclaim our ancestral and historical practices for taking good care of ourselves and our community. For Black folks, survival's often been treated as the baseline expectation that we should have endurance, that we should have strength, that we should have resilience. But healing goes beyond survival. We're not merely meant to cope with oppression. We're not designed to carry unprocessed trauma or generational trauma. We're worthy of things like softness, restoration, joy, wellness, in whatever shape, that should look like according to our terms. And so to me, calling healing a birthright, it pushes against the lie that says that, it's natural or inevitable, that we'll continue suffering and need to be resilient. This is something that's inherent for us. We don't have to earn it. It's not conditional. It's not a luxury. And having that understanding can reframe systems and how we think about structuring our day, structuring our families, structuring our work, structuring our team, our communities, when healing is just the cornerstone and not the afterthought. When I think about how this specifically impacts Black women, This word rises to the top, intersectionality,
Mm-hmm.
because we have so many aspects of our culture, and there are so honestly so many marginalized communities. Being a woman has been marginalized. Having any gender that's not the binary, not man or woman, has been marginalized. Um, your income, your education level. There's so many intersections to this, and the math says that these things can get compounded. And so not only am I dealing, with racism, but I'm also tired of the way of the intersection of being a Black woman specifically.
Mm-hmm.
That reminds me of some of the comments that were made before. Also, Marisha, you were talking about AI and are the stories around us. I was also thinking about how AI can be used as a tool against us. I was thinking about some of these images that we've seen in the media. A Black woman who was arrested protesting, her face changed by AI to make her it drastically look different, you know. Um, President Obama and Michelle Obama's images, being put in a video, a racist video with racist imagery. So all of these things, this narrative around us, I think any opportunity we have to reclaim and specifically center the healing of it, and what we've done over time to take good care of ourselves, is how we can reclaim that healing. And it starts with what we're doing, naming that this is a thing, describing its impact, and then literally asking ourselves, what do I need to do to take care of myself, given this new framing that I'm understanding about this? Given the truth, that I'm learning here, how can I start to reincorporate that and make that the story and the narrative? And what happens to my decision making, when I'm more empowered about my culture and my identity and the truth of like who I am and who my family is? I don't think that's a overnight thing. I think that's a mindfulness practice.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a constant paying attention, which, can be exhausting and tiring and is effort, but it's the type of effort that has a good and positive return on us and our
Mm-hmm.
spirit and our hearts and our minds. And so I think, for Black women, this is especially layered because, we are expected to be strong, but also nurturing and unshakable and carrying all of these things, that, some of the other panelists have alluded to. Um, but I think it's that noticing of what's going on, the removing of that story from the story that we tell about ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and reclaiming the narrative that's real.
Thank you so much. Can I just tell you that my phone is blowing up, the chat is blowing up, and we certainly want to get to our audience questions. But I just want to ask one thing. There's been so much duplication, right? So much synergy between the comments that the three of you have made, and I'm busy taking notes, but health has come up quite a bit in your responses. Hair has come up quite a bit in your responses. I'm particularly connected to that as we think about the Crown Act and the need for the Crown Act. And we've heard more than once, what's wrong with me? So if and I'll ask for a quick reaction to this on the part of any of the three of you. Pick one that just really concerns you more than the other, with respect to hair, health, or what's wrong with me, and just give me a quick comment of that before we move to one final question to you and our audience questions. Any of you? Hair, health, or what's wrong with me?
I'll start out. What's wrong with me bothers me to the core because it's the way I frame a lot of the issues that we have with Black folk is, what happened to me? It's always trauma framed for me. Like, what happened? You hear the stories, so to say what's wrong with me, it's like, what? What's wrong with the person that hit me upside the head with a baseball bat, verbally and emotionally? What's wrong with them? And a
Mhm.
lot of the solutions to racism, if you read about it and hear about it, it's always, what can we do? What type of therapy can we attend? How can we help heal ourselves? And when it's really whoever is causing these inflictions upon us through generation to generation. And now today,
Mhm.
racism still exists, and bringing that in the light and not telling folks be quiet and don't talk about it, that's not the solution to figuring out what's wrong with society. What's wrong with racist people? What's wrong with people for, criminalizing our behaviors that stem from institutionalized racism and years and years of abuse. And
Okay.
so, what's wrong with y'all?
Thank
Oh,
you
I'm getting about to get
for
my
that.
fighting response
Sure.
back.
Sure. Again, any other comments about those three categories? Hair has been something that's come up a lot. Health, obviously. What's wrong with me? Anyone else want to say something about that? Courtney, did you have your hand up or?
Oh yeah, be glad to say something about hair.
Okay. And we would be glad to hear that.
Yeah, just really quickly, I'm glad that you brought up the Crown Act, and I'm glad that there was even a mention of hair in general, because we know that's important. That's important to us. It's part of our expression and part of our identity as Black folks and as Black women. And so the protection of it with the Crown Act is just so important to be able to express ourselves. I was thinking about when I used to relax my hair, straighten it every day, flat iron on 450, like let's go, no consequences, dead ends out all the way. But that, and why was I doing that? Am I doing that because that's like I love my hair and that's my favorite style, or am I doing that because I have a shame about my curls? Or a shame about my texture or a shame about whatever, And so validating that all textures of hair are beautiful and welcome is just so important. And I think that directly ties to the health question too. How we feel about ourselves is so important.
Thank you so much. I'm going to move us to our final question. I'm going to ask Marisha to help us with this final question. We've talked, and this is before we open up to the audience, we have talked about um, so much in the last 40 to 45 minutes. And the purpose of these sessions, these action conversations, is to inspire, is to act, especially in support of the YWCA's mission to eliminate racism and to empower women. When you think about our conversation and the work that you're doing in this Black fatigue space, can you leave us with your concise and short thoughts so we can open it up to our audience for questions, especially those thoughts around how we reduce Black fatigue in our communities and in our workspaces?
Now, Diane, concise and short, we don't know how to do that.
Okay, but
But
we needed 2 hours, right? Instead
we
of
did. Look, we needed part two. But
that's right.
a lot of the things that came up through the conversation, one being that one acknowledge that this is real, right?
Yes.
Acknowledge that Black people are experiencing Black fatigue. Black fatigue is real. Believe when Black people name the harm. Acknowledge that racism exists and don't make Black people carry the burden of educating you about that it exists, right? I think that's a lot of the times, like do the work for the allies, like do the work and then figure out what you can do with the power that you have, and also structural. We're talking about this is systemic. Like there's the interpersonal, but it's also embedded in the systems, right? And so for us to really solve this, we have to change the systems and it has to be structural. And I mean, that's going to take time and people don't want to do that work either. But that means, looking at policies, compensation, promotion, who holds the power, and how do you redistribute that power within your organization? And I wanted to talk about what Courtney touched on, these stories, like reframing the deficit narrative. So it's not that we are exhausted, but reframing the Black people are exhausted. Racism is exhausting, right?
Mm,
Black people can't get loans. No, banks disproportionately deny loans to Black people. So we need to shift this language and move the responsibility from us. This is not
Mhm.
both everybody said this already, right? That this is not us. This is not our problem. It's put upon us, and we need to shift that language and responsibility that, and it's also not necessarily ours to solve. And it's
Mhm.
all, and lastly, the healing is so important. Take care of yourselves. Um, and reject those narratives that compromise your sense of self. Return back to your ancestral roots, as Courtney shared. We actually are working on a companion to Black Fatigue called Healing Black Fatigue. So I will be hitting up Dr. Toya and Courtney as well. But just because like that, it's so important. It's important to name Black fatigue and how it manifests, but the healing is even more important, right? And so we just and I'm got to be concise. So Diane, I'm done because you about to kick me off the panel. Done.
Thank you. Thank you. Courtney, do you want to share in some closing thoughts on your part before we open it up to the audience? Our next steps, what do we do to reduce Black fatigue in our communities and in our workplaces?
Thank you for the invitation. I'll be quick. I would just say, it's important not just to recognize these things, but to put action behind them, like you're
Mhm.
saying. And
Mhm.
so, it's hard to sit in the truth of it, but don't get stuck there. We can't get stuck in this feels uncomfortable. We actually have to, put the healing into practice, and keep trying, make the movement where you can. It grows from there.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Toya, our expert on fight and flight, if you could talk to us just a little bit about what you see, Dr. Toya, as the next steps and the kinds of action activities that we should be involved in to make this Black fatigue space better.
Yeah. My colleagues really summed it up well, and so I won't go through repeating. I mean, it was excellent. I was over here, y'all couldn't hear me on mute, like, yes, 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 the whole time. But it's like allies, let's change the system and not the person. Let's, bind together. If you see, Jesse Jackson, rest his soul, we looked at him marching and MLK marching, and they were marching along folks that didn't look like them. And so it takes the whole village, and the village is all kind of different complexions. Changing the system is most important. Institutionalized racism is real. So having conversations like this, kudos to YWCA. Kudos to your mom for writing that book. I didn't know that was your mom. And what a great surprise. I'm like, thank you for part two.
Yeah,
And she talked about James Baldwin's letters to his nephew. Not much has changed, and that can be discouraging, but my goodness, what can change when we bind together? So I love this conversation. Best and believe I'm gonna hit both y'all up for my podcast. Like I was like, this is gonna be lovely because this conversation is healing. How
yes,
many hearts and flashes and chat is going on because we're talking
yes,
about it. And so
yeah.
conversation is part of that healing journey. And so thank y'all for that.
Right. You can feel the energy. We probably only have time for just one question as I'm being alerted by my colleagues. And so I'll just open this up for any one of the three of you to address it. How do we distinguish between ambition and trauma-driven overperformance? How do we distinguish between ambition and trauma-driven overperformance? That's a great question.
It
Courtney,
feels
you look
like
like you were moving toward the,
I,
I
was
want, go
one of
ahead,
the
Dr.
saying to
Toy.
me, what were you gonna say, Courtney? Because I'm like, it's what is embedded in us. I look at my mom, my grandma, everybody's such a hard worker. Well, we
Mhm.
have this script that we
Mhm.
must
Mhm.
overdo it, do more in
Mhm.
order to just even be noticed as being on the same level. We're always we're always fighting, and then it looks like this crabs in a barrel, but we're fighting just to be noticed with other colleagues. It's like, but look at my CV, like look at my resume, it's this long, So I feel like it's the foundation is from the racial trauma that we have experienced. We
Mhm.
go about healing that racial trauma through exalting one another and compliments down to, girl, your hair is so cute with the curls, and come on, to really exalting the work that we're doing and giving each other rest, a restful space. This is a space created to give us brown
Yeah.
skin girls rest. And do we do that every day where we are in our places? Let's make sure that we're always a restful shoulder and chair, like we're always that space for one another.
Yes. Very good. Anyone want to add to that?
I'm glad to quickly just add,
Yes.
I think it goes to me, it goes to like, you know, ask yourself why you're doing the things that you're doing. Am I doing it because I love this work? I love what's being asked of me. I'm digging, like the team is good, it's aligned with my career. Or are there other thoughts like I have to do this or I'm not good enough? I'm a failure unless I blah blah blah, or such and such did this, and because that's the way that they did it, that's the way that I have to do it too. So for me it goes back to the why in it, and
Hmm.
when we're asking ourselves why we should be doing things because they satisfy a need for us, because we love it, because we're extremely interested in it, because we know that's our jam and can't nobody do it better than us, not for the shame based reasons or
Right.
the things that pivot us that sort of reinforce that we're not good enough unless.
Right.
So that's something that I think about. I try to examine the why behind what I'm doing and then move accordingly.
Thank you so much. This has been, and I shared this with my colleagues on the panel. This has been a true honor. When I purchased this book called Black Fatigue, and when I read some of the articles that have been written by Dr. Toya, and also when I researched and examined and studied your website, I never knew that we would land in a space in a place that was so invigorating. So I thank you. I thank you to our panelists for this informative, inspiring, and hopeful conversation on reimagining a world that moves closer to the elimination of racism, that acknowledges the trauma and the healing needed for Black people to improve their mental health and cling to wellness, and to identify spaces where Black fatigue can be reduced on an everyday basis. It has been an honor to serve as your moderator this afternoon. I look forward to follow-up conversations and discussions and lunches, if possible. Can't wait for Charlotte to come to Pittsburgh. You got to come to Pittsburgh, right? In the future. And I want to remind our audience to please join us on Wednesday, March the 18th for Women and the Workforce. Thank you so much. Have a great day and a wonderful week.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much.
Thank
Thanks, y'all.
you.
Take care.
Bye, y'all.
Bye bye.